Hi, Jing. Welcome to the Humans and AI podcast. How are you doing?
Hey Nick, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Great stuff. Well, for the benefit of our listeners and viewers, are you able to just do a quick introduction to yourself? So, who you are, where you're currently working, and a high-level sort of helicopter view of the company that you're working at?
Yeah, sure, happy to. My name is Jing Xie. I live in New York. Been here for about 15 years, and I'm a father of two boys. Busy, kind of, balancing my work life and my personal life. We'll talk about that later, I'm sure. And I currently work for a company called Memverge. I've been at the company for about 2.5 years, and I'm the vice president of go-to-market and partnerships, which means I own sales and I do a whole bunch of other things, just wear a lot of hats, everything to make the company successful and drive top-line growth.
Fantastic. Well, I'm sure we're going to go into that a lot more, in a lot more detail. Look, it'd be great just to get to know a little bit more about you, if that's okay. So, usually we'll sort of go back to the beginning a little bit, and I'll let you decide how far back we go and where we sort of start. But I'm sure it'll be relatable to a lot of people that are listening.
Yeah, sure. I'll try my best to kind of bridge where I started and how I ended up at Memverge, which is it's a Series B software company focused on AI infrastructure solutions and also high performance computing. And so really back to my beginnings, I moved to the U.S. when I was 3, born in China, and had very humble beginnings. Didn't really know what I wanted to do for most of my childhood, other than play video games and chase girls around and things like that. But I really had a kind of a I would say like a humble beginning. Parents didn't have a ton of money. Father passed away when I was 8, so really quickly had to kind of grow up and be the man of the house. Have a younger sister who's 7 years younger than me. She's the smarter one of the two. But eventually managed to do good enough in school to make it into university. I was lucky to get a full ride. I attribute some of that to just a combination of getting good enough grades, but also just hustling really hard and finding different opportunities and really digging deep to make the most of those opportunities. And so hopefully some of that background is relatable to the audience here. You don't really have to start from a platform of success in life. You can really do a few of the right things at a few of the right times to really set your trajectory in the direction that you want. So hopefully that's a little bit of a bridge to my early years. And I kind of figured out eventually what I wanted to do sometime during college. I mean, I started as a pre-pharmacy major, which is totally different and would have put me on a totally different trajectory had I not changed my mind about 1 year into college. I met some guys who were part of the business school at the University of Houston, and and I really started to think about what it would look like to start a career in business. And so I graduated eventually with a totally different degree, not pharmacy, but an accounting major and a finance major. And I started during the global financial crisis. So in 2008, I interned at IBM, did a good enough job, and they give me a full-time offer, and they honored it in 2009 when I was supposed to start.
Oh wow!
And so I was lucky. I was lucky to have that continuation because a number of my peers, the companies were just canceling offers left and right. So really lucky to have this great start during a tough time, economically in the U.S. And that was also how I eventually moved from Houston to New York.
It's a crazy time. Like you, I mean, I was early in career. I think I was a year into my grad scheme with the 2008 crisis, and I got made redundant, unfortunately. So it was one of those things where I was doing construction project management, and just that was my path, and then completely taken away. Didn't know what I was going to do either. I think people forget how much of a crazy time it was back in 2008, 2009. So it was,
it sure
we
was.
all had to graft.
Yeah, and I think that no matter what you were doing professionally, during that time. Everyone got a finance degree, just watching the stock market and trying not to lose all their money, right?
No, indeed. So obviously you had a great career at IBM, and obviously starting out in finance and did several sort of roles there. But did that IBM sort of career, I suppose, really sort of shape where you are today then, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, by the time I graduated, starting my career at IBM as a financial analyst, I was very excited just in terms of my professional, career, being able to start at a historic and long-standing tech giant like IBM. At that time, I still didn't know that my career would eventually pivot into a field of AI and really working at a company that's on the bleeding edge of developing software for AI. And so maybe I can just share a few things that I learned and a few key people that I got a chance to both work for and also be mentored by, and just some lessons that I learned along the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I really credit where I am today to a number of people, and I'm sure I'm not able to give everyone credit that has helped me along the way, but I think just a few things that I can share and a few key people I can share about and the lessons I learned. Hopefully it helps the audience here. So I would say early on at IBM, I was basically thinking I'm just going to become a CFO one day. I'll just stay in finance. I'll work my way up. I'll continue to hustle. And one of the first managers that I got to work for and learn from was a guy named Scott Layton. So he was basically my manager during my second to third year at IBM. And I won't go into some of the details around like exactly what my role was and what I was doing, because I don't really think any of that is necessarily the most important takeaways. But one of the things that I thought Scott was just really good at is he would say no to a bunch of things and to a lot of people that were asking our team to do various things, and he would say yes sometimes. And what I really learned from him is that to be selective in the work and the projects that you choose to commit to is really, really important. Because if you say no most of the time and then you say yes a few times, and you put your 99% of your time and energy, your blood, sweat, and tears into those projects, and you just come out doing a fantastic job, you do two things. One is you don't spread yourself too thin, trying to do too many things to impress too many people. And it also just creates this reputation, both individually and reflecting on the entire team that you work for, that essentially everything you touch, it looks like it turns to gold, right? Because you're able to really focus on a few things, get it right, do an exceptional job, better than anybody else. And when you work at a large company like IBM with so many different groups and teams, you want to be the one that is always looked upon as like they do it better than anybody else I've ever seen. And that was one of the lessons that I was able to learn from Scott, and I really appreciate that. And it was one of the things that I learned very early on, and I think it helped me set up for success. Maybe I can share a second person that I think touched a few different areas of my career as I went further in my journey and career at IBM. And maybe the second person that I'll tee up is a guy named Kieran McGrath. Great guy. He was basically already a CFO, so I was thinking, hey, I want to be a CFO. Who can I stare at and look for the things that I want to do during this period of my career so that I can become a CFO as well. And he was the first CFO that I directly supported a couple of years into my career at IBM. He was the CFO of IBM's software group, which is not the largest in terms of revenue, but it was the most profitable part of IBM's business. So just think about the most profitable business. He was the CFO, and I was able to support him as his revenue leader. So keeping track of all the deals, keeping track of all the finance considerations around driving revenue. And one of the things I learned from him, and this is really kind of based on behavior versus anything else, but he used to say that I will always outwork anybody else in the room, and there's nobody else who's going to work harder than me. And early on in somebody's career, if you can just work for a guy and kind of be in the room with a guy that has an amazing work ethic, gets to work earlier than everybody else on the team, stays later or works harder, in certain ways, and in meetings it's just hyper focused. It's a really good kind of role model to be close to. And so I also credit, Kieran for just the chance to work for him and also learn from him through some of his actions.
Absolutely. I think that's just it. I mean, mentors are so key. And I think when I speak to people like yourself, quite frequently it is because of the takeaways that you guys have from those mentors. And I think I've had it before where they've said, laser sharp focus. So like I say, not saying yes to everything, but choosing a few really critical things and doing it really, really well. And I think anybody that says working hard and grafting isn't the key to success, I probably disagree with them. So I can see why you've taken that into part of your mantra. I mean, obviously mentors helped you. We'll talk about later, because I'm sure you've also helped mentor people as well. So I'll be asking you a bit of that later on. But obviously your IBM career, you started off in finance, learned from these people. How did you then sort of pivot into more of a customer-facing sales role? How did that sort of come about?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think part of it for me personally was that I was always just very curious in general. And I was, becoming increasingly more curious about the actual products and technology, how things worked outside of just, rolling up numbers and being able to plan and being able to forecast. Like, don't get me wrong, those are all great skills to have, but I felt like I was thirsting for a little bit more than that. Mm-hmm. And even in certain situations and in certain meetings, it almost felt like going above and beyond the expected kind of finance responsibilities was not necessarily rewarded or necessarily encouraged as much as I would have wanted. And I think that's all natural in an organization. If you're in an accounting or finance role, you're really looked at to be the owner of call it the numbers, and the way that the numbers are speaking and communicating and things like that. And nobody's expecting you to explain how the inner workings of a product are, or necessarily, are we technically doing the right things to keep up with our competitors, right? So I started to get a lot more interested and a lot more curious about just everything else that were closer to product and sales and marketing and all of these other things that IBM was doing. And so, I would maybe credit, the next two people I can talk about who kind of came into my life during the right times during that phase of my career. And one of those folks is a lady named Kim Blomker, and another person is a lady named In-hee Cho. They were both IBM executives, and really kind of, I just remember the things that stick out to me the most is I remember the chance to have conversations with them about my career, certain frustrations about, hey, is it right for me to just continue to stay on this finance track and CFO track, or should I start to explore other things? And I think that having some of these conversations with both Kim and In-hee, it really helped me see what a career looked like to branch out of finance. I'm sure that there are people here listening, who are thinking about making a career transition that goes beyond just switching companies. But is finance the right thing for me, or is marketing the right thing for me, or should I move into a different field? And one of the things I think that really helped was, just having people to be sounding boards who have done that themselves. And in the case of In-hee, she was in both a marketing and more of a product executive role. And so it was really nice to have some opportunities to shadow her during, different events and during different projects, and just to see what kind of life was like and what a career looked like stepping out of a traditional finance role. And I think some of that gave me the courage to continue to explore. And also, there's this question that I think everyone should ask themselves periodically, which is that, the question is, am I still passionate about my job? And am I still passionate about the company I work for? And also, am I passionate about the field that I'm in, right? And, if all three of those things are yeses, you're probably a lucky guy or a lucky gal, and probably, nothing different you need to do. But if any of those things are no's, then, I think it's a good time to think about what it means, right? Because if you're not checking at least one of those boxes off, are you really going to be your best showing up each and every day, Monday through Friday? And so if you're not able to check off even one yes that you're passionate about, your company or the industry you're working for or your specific role, then I think it's really hard to be your best. And if you can't be your best, then it's also really hard to be recognized, right, and to progress in your career or to have as many opportunities. And so I think part of it goes back to figuring out what those passions are and then starting to do a few of the things that move you in that direction.
Absolutely. I think that's it, isn't it? I mean, the working week can either be very long or it can fly by, and it tends to fly by if you're passionate about where you work and what you're doing. Sales as an example. I mean, we've seen lots of salespeople, candidates and execs that we've worked with over the years, and they don't all come from a traditional background. In our early days, we all tend to sort of figure it out. I think that's the way it tends to be. And you take all that wealth of experience, and when you do find your calling and your focus, that experience that you've got before, whether it be finance, whether it be in marketing, engineering, or whatever it might be, it tends to actually help make you better at your new job and your new direction. And we see lots now. I mean, some of the greatest salespeople I've worked with have come from a product background or an engineering background or a finance background. They haven't just started as a graduate salesperson out of university. They've come from something else. So I'm glad you took that journey yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it does give you much more depth to have, started in one domain and to have moved into, at least one other domain. And I definitely think that over the course of your career, you hopefully build up a number of relationships through mentors and sponsors that can help you continue to kind of navigate those life journeys. And I think that maybe the exciting thing about AI specifically is that I essentially think about everybody as only having about a bachelor's degree. Because if you think about how long ChatGPT has been in all of our lives, it's really been no more than a few years. And so I don't think even people that were in that were doing things as a data scientist, machine learning, AI, even before the most recent chapter here, no one was this focused, lasering in on how to apply it in all these different areas of business. But I think that is the exciting part, because I think it takes the pressure off of everyone to have that kind of mindset. Like, just have the mindset that everyone's got only a bachelor's degree. So even if you have only started today to learn about what AI is doing to change our lives, and even if this is like the first podcast you're listening to about AI, like, only other people are only maybe a few years at most ahead of you.
That's it. I mean, AI, it's one of those things now where we're still at that crossroads where you've got people that use AI, things like ChatGPT, who can't live without it, and you'll have a conversation 10 minutes later and they've never even touched it. So there's still some adoption going on, but I think it literally is, you either can't live without it, or you still got to be baptized into the world of using some of these common products that we live with. AI is only going to be growing. It's only going to be getting more and more involved in everyday life, but also in business as well. And obviously AI has sort of shaped your career in recent years. So you truly sort of embraced it. Has that really been part of what's dictated your different moves now moving forward? So you've had a couple of roles, obviously, in Memverge now. Has it been following the AI path on purpose, or has it just sort of been a happy accident?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of a few things. I think there there is some intention, and there is also just some some kind of trusting the greater powers that be, right? So maybe the last person I'll talk about, and then I'll kind of zero in a little bit more into like my journey after IBM. Is there's also someone who's been a mentor to me for many years. So I'm very grateful to know a lady named Lucy Chan. She's a retired but not really retired sales executive at IBM. She coaches a lot of emerging sales leaders and also new sellers that come into IBM still today. But I think she's also played an important role in my life, especially as I left IBM and began to explore other career paths. And I think that one of the things that she's always reminded me to focus on, regardless of what company or what job role I'm stepping into, is to really think about your authentic self. Like, what are the things that really make you tick, and kind of what do you enjoy, and what do you naturally gravitate and are good at, and just being very self-aware. I think that that helps you kind of navigate and choose the right next steps, almost irrespective of the particular company or the particular title or the particular industry that you work in. So maybe with that context in mind, one of the key things that ultimately drove me to kind of close my chapter at IBM, which was a good 8 to 9 years where I learned a lot, had already started to pivot out of finance. I was already doing a technology business development role for the last few years at IBM, which gave me an amazing opportunity to go and meet different tech startups and look for partnership opportunities, help IBM evaluate companies that it may want to acquire, and put together the justifications for why, and put together the business opportunity if we did kind of pull the trigger on some of these companies. I had already started to pivot in that direction because I felt like that was the passion and the calling for me at the time, which was to branch out of finance and start learning a lot more about the actual technology. I became really aware of the cloud providers and the rise of AWS in the early years from 2010 all the way through 2016 and 17. I was basically looking at them as a competitor and helping IBM do some competitive analysis along the way and figuring out what we needed to add to our portfolio to be more competitive. But ultimately, why did I leave? I left because one of the coolest things that I was seeing, the only way to get more involved in at the time was to leave IBM. I had a friend of mine who started running his own family office and hedge fund. He's just really, really good at investing, and he was just really good at getting to the bottom and to the truth of what exactly a company was doing, which sometimes could help you find really great ideas to be long in a particular stock and company because you really figured out what they were doing before anybody else could. And also in the opposite effect, he was also really good at figuring out companies that were saying that they were doing one thing and then they were actually doing a totally different thing. And so for those kind of companies, you would do your research just the same, but you would make sure you're absolutely right, and then you would short those stocks and you would make money on those short investments as well. And I saw an opportunity to learn from him and kind of do something that looked really fun and interesting. And without again knowing that it would eventually lead me back into another tech company and startup, I worked for a hedge fund for a number of years. He prefers to keep things very low key and confidential, so I won't even talk too much details about the specific firm or anything. But suffice to say, we've done some really good work. We've been covered by the Wall Street Journal. We've been covered by Bloomberg and the Financial Times over on your side of the pond. And so happy to have some offline conversations on
I'll make sure we do
later. But I think the life lesson I learned during those years transitioning out of IBM was that if you put yeah, if you put your energy into something that you have a genuine curiosity, interest, and passion for, you can get good at anything at almost any point in your career. I mean, there was some things that I could take away from my 8 to 9 years at IBM, like, you know, some knowledge of technology companies, kind of how the businesses worked. But I had no experience working for a hedge fund. I had no experience working with brokers and you know, in our banking relationships, and I had no experience putting on a trade, taking off a trade. Had no experience talking to regulators, pitching, you know, journalists about interesting findings that we were, you know, discovering. Had no previous experience, you know, in terms of how to look at a company in a very deep way and looking for clues that, you know, other people may have missed. But I was able to learn all that along the way. Because I was essentially working for someone who was the best at what they did, right? And I think that's the other thing, which is in whichever field, and especially applicable to in this field of AI, be looking out for the people that seem to be the best at what they do in a very specific way. So, you know, if you just have a passion for LLMs, go to a few meetups, go to a few events, start to figure out who really, really, really understands LLMs, right?
Yep.
And then if this is your passion, then go get to know them and look for opportunities to go work for them. Alternatively, you know, if you have a passion for hardware, go figure out who really understands an NVIDIA chip, who really understands why, or if, you know, somebody else will catch up to them, like maybe somebody who's working at AMD or Intel or one of these other companies. You know, AWS has their custom silicon, like Inferentia and Trainium. Go figure out who those people who really understand the nuts and bolts of what's going on with the next generation of these accelerators, right? And go study under them somehow. Like, find a way to add value and help them out. I think if you kind of take this very surgical approach where you look for the people who are truly outstanding in their field, and you find a way to go and work for them or help them out and eventually be able to work for them, it's the fastest way to just get really good at something where in the span of 1 to 2 to 3 years, you're going to be better than 99% of the people out there, just because you're basically under their tutelage, right? And there's nowhere else better to learn than under an expert.
So is that your biggest sort of takeaway from coming to work for like a family office thing? Because obviously with IBM, you walked away, you know, developing and harnessing a lot of these finance skills. You then also learn about business development, go-to-market, and selling tech. Coming in here, it seems to be more about research and really digging in and deep dive and gaining all that learning. And I'm sure all those skills you had at IBM helped you in that role. But when you came out of that role, is that probably your biggest sort of takeaway? Is that sort of analytical sort of mind?
Yeah, I think that it was a huge change in many ways. So maybe I'll highlight a few things around that. One was organizational size. Went from like a 100,000 person company to a company of 4 people. Very different. I went from having, you know, a large office to, you know, a tiny little office in New York City. And I went from being able to lean on a much larger network of experts to a mental model where you can quickly become an expert in a bunch of different things by just focusing and essentially, you know, being kind of much more self-sufficient in terms of how you go about solving problems. And yeah, and I would say during the time I was had the opportunity to work there, it gave me a level of self-confidence that is hard to gain at a large company, because the self-confidence comes from just being able to do a whole bunch of stuff ultimately based on your own willpower and time and energy. And the biggest difference in terms of how you feel day to day is that at a large company you tend to wait for other people So you'll wait for them to make a decision. You'll wait for them to give you something to do, and then you have this capacity to essentially take more breaks and wait on others. And if you're someone who's more of a go-getter, those environments can be frustrating because you don't like waiting for other people so much. But when you're working at a startup, at a small company, whether it's a startup or just a small organization, really the only person that's keeping you from getting to the next milestone or achieving the goal is most of the time yourself. So it's a very different mental model where every day you're trying to be the better best version of yourself. And so you just kind of iterate very quickly from that point. And you start to know exactly where your limits are, where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are. And you do become, kind of the best version of yourself, I think, through some of that testing. And it only, it happens much better at a smaller company because, again, you don't really get pushed to your limits as much at a large organization where you have this capacity to just, wait on people just based on the organizational design.
No, absolutely. And that actually lends itself to the next sort of question. So obviously, when you moved on from the family office, you stepped up, you moved into a COO type position. You've worked at Verizon as well before obviously coming to Memverge. Is there any sort of key pivotal moments, between, coming out of the family office to now at Memverge that really sort of helped drive your career forward or sort of actually equipped you to do the roles that you're doing today?
Yeah, I'll briefly talk about where and how I made that next transition. So one of the limited partners at the hedge fund was deeply invested in another company, and they needed some help. So ultimately, I had this opportunity to transition from working at the hedge fund back into another tech software company. And I came in during, I would say, the last, call it the last quarter mile of that company's journey, which was very challenging because a lot of the capital had already been spent. But my charter there was to do everything I could to kind of steady the ship and hopefully pivot it in a better direction. So in 2019, I was able to step out of the hedge fund role and move into my first startup, which is a company called Formulus Black. I was able to go straight in at a pretty senior level because the investor in the company was an investor in the hedge fund, and there was a good degree of trust, and I was also able to prove myself quickly to be able to essentially lead that team. It was a chief operating officer role, and functionally at that company during that time of the company's life, one big part of it was to steady and to reduce some of our cash burn, but also it was to try to pivot the product in a more promising direction, and at the same time the company was trying to win its first customers. So I would say my three responsibilities were: one, it was financial, which was great because I started in finance. The second was to find opportunity and pivot it in a direction, so that was more product. And then how to actually sell to customers, how to listen to their problems, how to build up a sales team and run it. So I was leading a team of about 15 people at the time, doing these different things. And again, I guess the things that I really enjoyed from that role was it gave me this confidence to lead. Again, gave me a similar dynamic as the hedge fund, where it was a small and very entrepreneurial environment, and we were able to kind of test and iterate on a number of things to find to help the company find some success. And ultimately, I guess that chapter was quite just a roller coaster, which I think everyone's going to have a roller coaster segment of their career. We had some money, so we hired up. We started to win a few customers. We started to make some great partnerships with companies like Intel and AMD at the time, and we were in a space that actually competed with the company I'm at today, called Memverge. So that's actually the early, early on when kind of Memverge came into my my life story. But we were essentially competing with them.
Okay.
And from 2019 going into 2020, everyone kind of knows how that chapter started to play out. Things just started to shut down, and it was really tough to find the additional bridge funding that we needed. And so so we kind of made it through 2020, but by 2021, when we really had to raise the capital, we just couldn't. And so it was a roller coaster in the sense that things went up and then things came
It really
came
was.
down. Yeah, so I had a really quick crash course into what it looks like to build a company and scale it, and then ultimately have to unwind the company and and kind of close shop. So it was a good kind of experience in the sense that it really tested me in different ways, and also taught me a lot about how to manage through adversity. And I think that it also opened up some new doors, even during times where I wasn't sure what I was going to do next.
And obviously that sort of means you've got to delve into a bit of mental resilience and toughness there, because obviously you're doing something really, really positive, and then all of a sudden you're having to do some very difficult things, make very difficult decisions. It does make you stronger, and it does make you far more capable, more skilled on the next opportunity. But I appreciate it's a challenging time at the time that it is in. So obviously you're now in Memverge. You've been doing different roles within go-to-market and what have you. Able to tell people a little bit more about Memverge, what you're doing, the challenges there, and how the future looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So, so I had this opportunity to kind of jump straight into working at Memverge once we had made the difficult choice to start winding things down at Formulus Black. I was a little too burned out, honestly, at that point, and I wasn't fully decided on kind of where my interests and passions were around that point, right? I was kind of juggling. Hey, should I start finding a career that's a little bit maybe more stable than working at a startup, and maybe a little bit better work-life balance than maybe going into again another startup. And so I kind of took a chance back into a large enterprise and working for Verizon in an area that still leveraged some of the skills and experiences that I had developed in tech and also even while at Formulus Black. And so I was helping Verizon for about a year launch and scale their edge computing and networks business. So still combining computing, still combining some of my knowledge for the software ecosystem, and also working with the hyperscalers. So I think it was a good time, but I quickly realized that some of the same feelings I had about Verizon were similar to the feelings I had when I was at my last few years at IBM, and I just had this interest to go back and work in an area that was more entrepreneurial, as well as a little bit closer to some of the cutting edge. And so, why did I join Memverge? One, I still had an opportunity thanks to the amazing leadership team that saw something in me even a year later after things initially didn't work out in terms of me joining the company, and I just thought Memverge was doing a few really cool things. So one of the things that Memverge is focused on doing is helping high performance computing teams who are moving some of those workloads to the public cloud. We help them run them more cost efficiently. And I know everyone says they have solutions for running more cost efficiently on a public cloud, but I really found that what we were doing specifically to help customers at Memverge was quite differentiated and unique. So maybe I'll spend like another minute talking about that solution, and then I'll talk a little bit more about what we're doing specifically on the AI side. So we have this technology. It's called transparent checkpointing, and what it essentially lets you do when you apply it to cloud infrastructure is that it allows any company who's running just a ton of batch computing, which can be many times used for analysis, data processing, It's heavily, batch computing is very heavily used in financial services, also in semiconductor design, where the next AI chips are being designed, as well as in the life sciences to develop new drugs and find cures to diseases. It's a workload pattern where if you can use these things that are available on every single hyperscaler, called spot compute or spot instances, you can do these computations for easily 50, 60, 70% less than you would normally pay. Because every cloud provider has a ton of computing capacity at any given moment. And what they do to incentivize that incremental user is they'll offer some of that compute at a deeply discounted price. And so they call that spot. So everybody's got a spot pricing for all the different compute options that are available, whether you're using AWS or Google Cloud or Azure. And so therefore every customer has this ability to use the same horsepower machine, but at a deep discount. And the main trade-off you make when you're using spot instances is that because you're getting this amazing discount and the cloud providers are giving you this capacity because no one else is needing it at the time, they all reserve the right to take it back at a moment's notice. So you could get just a 30-second warning or a 2-minute warning in the case of AWS, and even if you're not done running whatever computation you're currently using the machine for, your machine just gets zapped and taken back. So you end up losing all your work, especially if you haven't designed your application to actually be spot resilient. And the Memverge checkpoint restore technology helps you not lose any of your work. It captures all the data that's in memory on the machine, so on the DRAM portion of the machine, as well as all the data that's being stored in like a scratch file or scratch storage. And our software carries that workload over from one machine to the next. So you basically can keep using spot instances and not lose any of your work, and you can continue to save money and get almost none of the downsides of using spot in the first place. And so companies love this. And at the time I joined Memverge, we were just getting into this spot instance solutions market. So we call this ability to run on spot instances but not have any of the negative side effects and be able to survive spot instance terminations. We call it spot surfing. So that was essentially the first product that really drew me to Memverge. I thought it was hugely innovative, and we started to support initially CPU-based spot workloads. And over the last 2 years, we've been working with NVIDIA. We also recently started working with AMD to support the ability to offer transparent checkpointing on NVIDIA and AMD GPUs. And that unlocks another exciting opportunity for the company, which is to help customers save money on the public cloud when they use spot NVIDIA GPUs or spot AMD GPUs. Because we can now do the same thing, which is for any application, doesn't have to be modified by the end user. The end user doesn't have to understand or stare at the screen to track spot interruption. Our software just handles that entire interruption behavior and allows you to not lose, again, any of your work and either keep on training the model, keep on fine-tuning the model, keep on running your inferencing. We can basically now offer spot surfing for GPUs. And so that's also really, really exciting, and that's a newer development. And lastly, I think the other thing that's really exciting about Memverge now, I didn't even know about the journey we would take initially in this direction, but the company's got some really great engineers, and we're seeing this need for both better infrastructure, like GPU infrastructure resource management, scheduling, and also at the much higher level when people are building their AI agents, we see a need for some sort of automated personalization and the ability to remember conversations. So we're also in the middle of building, and also we have already built and working with some customers who are needing to essentially manage a GPU cluster much better. And we've, again, found ways to use that transparent checkpointing technology in some really innovative ways from a GPU scheduling standpoint.
So,
yeah.
Go ahead. So, obviously the spot surfing, I read up on it on your website, and it's incredible because obviously price is always going to be, something that's going to be ultimately of interest to, consumers. The fact that you're not actually harming the quality of the data and all that workload is not gone for wasting is amazing. And then obviously the scheduling orchestration. So if the way you're working with your clients now, that means they just don't have to develop it in-house. They can just bring in and license your software on top, essentially. So you're just constantly adding value very, very quickly within, whether it be a neo cloud or whether it be a large enterprise.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing some very complementary things around the initial solution that we started to offer, which was to spot surf, alongside these newer solutions to manage an AI GPU cluster and to start automating some of the things that can make AI agents much more effective immediately. And the complementary thing is this. I'm seeing a lot of companies and enterprises, they're essentially trying to shift their budgets to make more room for AI, right? Like most companies are not having explosive revenue growth to the point in which you can just keep on doing everything you were already doing and still make room for AI. So everyone's trying to figure out how to optimize the other things so that you can create the budget to really pursue the top 2 or 3 generative AI projects at the corporation. And so one of the things they're doing is to try to save money on their traditional compute. Some of them are finding that the existing data center that they have is not as cost effective as just moving to the cloud. So some of them are moving CPU-based workloads into the major hyperscalers. We're seeing that in many industries, certainly seeing that in finance. Just to make space in the data center with the limited power, cooling, and all of the other things they have, right? They're trying to make space, physical space and power cooling space for the GPUs to be, installed and building up their own clusters by doing that. And other folks, and so when they take these workloads to the cloud, we can help them optimize the cost of it.
Yep.
And other folks are already running a ton of workload in the cloud, and we're helping them free up the cost of running those CPU workloads by helping them run it on Spot better, so that they can make room for again continuing to invest in both AI infrastructure and the solutions that run on top. So we're seeing a lot of cross-selling opportunity with many of the enterprises because we're actually helping them accelerate AI by freeing up budget in the non-AI areas where they still have significant computing spend. And so that's also been quite exciting.
And look, the market's constantly evolving, isn't it? I think that's the one thing. I mean, whether it would be around just businesses and companies like Nvidia sort of changing the landscape a little bit. Obviously, they've just done announcements this week and creating a marketplace with several neoclouds on there. May well be more being added to it. You see AWS, they go through different shifts over the time, and so same for Microsoft Azure. And obviously, you're servicing a lot of these, across the cloud space. Where do you see the future moving now, and how do you see this evolving for Memverge?
Yeah, so I think while at the same time, NVIDIA has done an amazing job kind of dominating this market and offering essentially the best-in-class way to run your AI solutions and build agentic AI and all these other new buzzwords. I think there is still quite a bit of hesitation from the end consumers to be locked into a single vendor.
Yep.
So I think that there is a lot of interest and curiosity and just a general awareness that even though today kind of all roads lead back to CUDA and NVIDIA and everything that they're doing, I'm seeing that at least most of the large enterprises that we work with, they have a strategic path to ensure some level of diversification. And that can look like many things. So each of the hyperscalers, they're developing their own custom silicon. Mm-hmm. So if you look at what AWS is doing, what Google Cloud is doing, they each offer an alternative to using NVIDIA on their clouds. And they each offer their own custom silicon for running the same models and running the same inferencing. And so there is curiosity that I'm seeing in a strategic plan to test and validate alternatives. And then outside of the hyperscalers, you have NVIDIA. NVIDIA looking over their shoulders at AMD, and also some of the things that AMD is doing with their GPU roadmap. It looks quite compelling, and what we see for firms that are not kind of going all in on the hyperscale clouds, but instead they're building at least an on-prem footprint in addition to what they're doing on the hyperscale clouds. Many of them are building it where they might buy 4 to 8 NVIDIA cards, and they'll buy one AMD card, like in terms of just making sure that they have a secondary hardware platform to to test against. And so one of the things we've done in response to seeing these kind of trends is that when we are building and when we are delivering this GPU management software for different teams that are ultimately kind of like those platform leaders or machine learning operations leaders who are having to oversee the infrastructure, we're building our, we call it memory machine AI, or sometimes we call it Memverge AI. We're building this as a hardware agnostic software management platform for the GPU infrastructure. So whether you're using NVIDIA cards or AMD cards or some combination of both, as well as using some of the hyperscale custom silicon, you'll be able to monitor, resource manage, and schedule workloads to these different hardware platforms all through one common interface, which is the software that we're delivering there. And so I think that's one way that we're looking to differentiate. And we do see other kind of players in the market that are kind of betting all into one or the other. But I think the reality from as far as we can see is that everyone is going to have at least a few different hardware architectures over the next few years, even though today it's like 99% NVIDIA.
And look, obviously, you're doing your research. Going back to what you were talking about, some of your experiences before, is going out and talking to everybody, understanding what they're doing, getting the market, and really getting stuck in. Building your sales organization now at Memverge to ensure you're successful. What are the key sort of initiatives that you've been in place in the business to take what is not necessarily a startup, but take a business that is clearly on an upward trajectory? How are you ensuring that you're equipped with the right structures in the business to grow bottom line revenues?
Yeah, that's a great question. So maybe I'll talk about a few kind of things that we've done and tried that seem to be working, and also in conjunction how the team has been able to grow. So when I started at Memverge, I started as a director, quickly got 2 promotions over the last 2 years to senior director and then vice president. I didn't have any direct reports when I started. Now I've got a team of, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people. So I've got 6 people under me, and then and I work with a bunch of other folks really closely, cross-functionally in the organization. And I think a few things. First is when you're building up a team, if you have the opportunity to kind of build up your team, it's really great when you've already put enough material out there. Not just the company website, but when you put enough material about what you're doing, how you're doing it, how you think about it on the internet, places like LinkedIn, etc. The quality of the candidates that come and want to work for your company, I think it actually just goes up. Mm-hmm. And because they already see who you are as a person, they already see how you think about things. And beyond the corporate website, they already have a pretty good idea that they either do or don't want to work for you and your team. Yeah. And so one of the things that has been really complimentary that we did early on, which helped in building our team, is that we decided that LinkedIn would be one of our primary public-facing communication channels. So we would use LinkedIn to tell customer stories. If they were okay with using their names, we would just use their names. If they were, not necessarily okay with using their names, we would just abstract away the company name, but we would tell the story so that the community would benefit from learning about how either we solved a problem, learned about a problem, or just observed a general trend that is happening in the industry with respect to, high performance computing or some sort of life sciences, genetic, analysis and pipelines, or, what people are doing in AI. So we would just start telling stories on LinkedIn, sharing our observations, no kind of corporate messaging, just really being honest and truthful about what we were seeing and what we were excited about and how we were helping solve problems. And I think that's taken us quite far, just by having an authentic communications channel beyond the corporate website. And it's really helped me build up a really great team, because they come in from the very beginning with a much better understanding of what the team does, what the company does, and just being all around very excited about working here. And the qualities that I then look for once these people have kind of self-selected that they really want to work here and they think they're good fits for the role, I look for, above all else, the ability to learn and be adaptable. I think it's a little less important, what previous specific roles you had, or even how much exact experience you've had in a particular area. But I think that ability to learn fast, have a good, strong, hard work ethic, and just to be kind of intellectually curious, I think those things go very far. And especially at a startup where things are changing all the time, it's good to have people that are themselves kind of entrepreneurial in their thinking and how they act. So I found that generally to be a really good a really good litmus test during the interview process. And and then I tend to just give people as much responsibility and autonomy as they can take on as quickly as possible. So we just hired a guy last week to help us continue to drive more into the AI side of things. So his focus and sales role is to help us drive the Memverge AI business. Hired him, just started first day last week. Today already took his first customer meeting. Actually yesterday. I didn't even join. I said, look, I trust you. I'll look at the recording later. We did a quick prep session ahead of time, and off to the races. So that's also just kind of like the style that I like, just to empower people as quickly as possible and let them shine.
Well, I think if you don't do that, you end up just getting more of the same. So, if you're getting people with slightly different experiences and it's more about their adaptability and like you say, load them up, not until they fail, but load them up to see how much they can sort of take on and develop, it is brilliant. And again, the fact that you've got people going on customer meetings, within a week without you is probably unusual, but it works, doesn't it? It does work. I mean, at the end of the day, what could go wrong? So it's just all pushing it that way. And you're using tech as well. So you're using AI tools, I guess, to help with those meetings. So you sort of bring it internally, and you've got recordings of those conversations.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we use Gong. Gong's great for some of those types of things.
I've not heard that one.
Yeah, GONG. It's a great kind of sales tool, and it records meetings, transcribes them, suggests things that you should do based on the conversations. It even coaches you to speak more or speak less based on how much you should be listening to a customer versus talking over the customer. So it does a bunch of cool things. And so I would say, like, the other thing that I think is good professional advice for people in a sales role as well as in other kind of roles as I've seen this kind of AI field develop is that, and I think this is also specifically something I look for when I hire people. In each of the 6 people that are on my team today, you should personally strive to look for specific areas where you can be better than AI. I think that's a great thing to think about. Maybe on a weekly or maybe once a month or even once a quarter basis, when you kind of think about yourself and how to kind of add a layer of job security, right, to your own self. You don't have to be the best at everything, but you should find some very specific things within your domain that you feel like you can be the specific best at. So maybe it's not that I'm the best account executive, because that's a very broad statement. But it could be like, I'm the best at hunting mid-sized companies in this particular vertical, right? Or, if you're like a chef, like you don't have to be good at cooking everything, but like I'm the best at making, this particular filet mignon with this particular sauce, right? And everybody's going to come to my restaurant because they want that particular filet mignon with that particular sauce, right? You want to get really specific, and you want to get good at it, and then you want to make sure everybody knows that you're really, really good at that specific thing. I think that's how you can kind of future-proof yourself. And you can get into a position where AI is never above you. AI is always alongside you as a tool. Because if you are so good at that specific thing, it's very, very hard, even today with all this, amazing technological development, all these amazing NVIDIA GPUs, it's very hard for AI to be that good at a very specific thing. And we each have that capacity within ourselves to get really good at that one specific thing. And I think that will take you very, very far in life, both, professionally and personally. And therefore, you're kind of always going to be the quarterback of the AI, and the AI is not going to quarterback you. So hopefully that also resonates. Yeah. And I really, truly believe it.
It sounds like you're talking about, you can't be brilliant at everything. It's about, encouraging and harnessing your inner expert. So like you're literally just being the best at one thing or two things, whatever it is. And I think, funny enough, we I had a guest on season 1, and he wrote a book about his basically. He was a lawyer before moving into tech space, and he talked about AI and how we embrace AI, and rather than let AI take over or threaten what we're doing. And the argument was, and the debate he was doing was, does it remove the need for an expert? So if you think about when you're training to be a lawyer back in the day, you would sit there in the courtroom and you'd sit there and you'd be reading textbook after textbook after textbook, listening to different cases. Now AI can do that for you. So actually, it's one of those things. So you need to find something that it can't replace, and or you can do it, like you say, you can do it better. And I think that's a unique perspective. And I think whether you're in sales or, like you say, whether you're a chef or something like that, that's the big thing. And I think being able to do something really, really well and taking pride in it, and knowing that you're the best, whether it's in your company or in your field, or you just think you're the best you can be, is something that maybe particularly respectfully, more early in career people need to probably really harness.
Yeah, and I think so. And one of the things we're doing specifically at Memverge along this line of thinking is it's a really so the thing itself is called Memverge Intelligent Enterprise Memory, and what it's based off of is the idea that at least in the short term and medium term, AI is really more meant to, and it can be its best when it's augmenting and enhancing human performance, not necessarily replacing it. Although there probably will be areas where people are looking to kind of replace certain human tasks with AI, or kind of AI-driven robots. So the thing that we're doing with intelligent enterprise memory is essentially making it easier for an LLM to learn the personal characteristics. Like you think about like your DNA, it reflects through your words, actions, preferences, how you interpret and how you see and learn information. There's this personal fingerprint that we're trying to capture in every interaction that an end user has with an LLM, and we use that to help the LLM better assist or generate content or generate ideas or explain things back to the individual. And so the way that intelligent enterprise memory works is it's a software solution that any enterprise can essentially bolt onto their inferencing stack, and it learns each individual, which is really exciting to me, because what I see today that people are doing when they call themselves a personalization solution is that they're actually not personalizing at all. They're stereotyping. So they're saying, I have this solution, I'm going to sell it to the sales team at every single company, and this solution is really good for sellers. But in reality, like, what is a seller? A seller is an individual person. They have different backgrounds. They've worked at different companies. They've sold different products. Some sellers are really good at, verbal communication. Some sellers are really good at written communication. Some sellers are much more intellectual. Some sellers are much more, I just want to hang out with you and get a lunch and get a dinner, and that's how they build the relationships and get the deals done, right? Every seller is actually very unique, and that applies to every marketer. That applies to every HR professional. That applies to software developers. Everybody's actually very unique. And so you can't really have a personalization solution that is meant for salespeople or meant for marketers, because all of that is just fake and kind of stereotypical, right? And so what we're building is the ability to use software to give an LLM the ability to learn that this particular seller is exactly like this. They like bullet points, they love information, or they like summaries and they don't like a ton of details, or they like short answers, or they like long answers. They like to be helped after the first question with a set of recommendations, and other people maybe don't, right? Like there's a level of personalization that is not being addressed by today's solutions with LLMs. And so the intelligent enterprise memory is meant to kind of plug that gap. And it'll also give any LLM, not just ChatGPT, the ability to memorize and remember past sessions and past conversations. So if you go back to your ChatGPT app, it remembers all the different conversations you had. It summarizes the theme and the topic on that given day at that given time. You can always go back to it, and you can always trust that it at least remembers what you were talking about in that moment of time. This Memverge Intelligent Enterprise Memory will automatically help the LLM, any LLM, have this type of longer term memory. And not only that, it'll help it share this longer term memory with other LLMs that could benefit from it. So if you think about like an enterprise use case, somebody's using one LLM, but then uses another tool that has another LLM behind it. What if that LLM doesn't have any of the memory of the first LLM? And if it did, it could help you much more quickly, right? Yeah. So the idea is that the Memverge Enterprise Intelligent Memory will be a layer that can be shared across multiple agents, multiple LLMs, and it actually learns your specific preferences with something as little as just understanding how you tend to like talking to the LLM itself. But you can enrich it with other enterprise data about each individual or each employee, and that helps it become even more personal and able to help each person at that individual level. So that's the thing I'm the most excited about, and we're starting to demo and work with design customers on this particular solution this year, currently right now, and it's something I think about probably a good 25-30% of my day at this point. But I'm very excited about what promise it has for the industry.
And that's it. And have you got, just speaking obviously more about Memverge and the services that you offer, and we talked a little bit about offline. I mean, have you got any, in fact, you even mentioned it earlier about case studies, just examples where you ask clients, can you actually sort of, shout out about some of the solutions that you've offered and where you sort of ease some of their challenges? Have you got any particular examples where you've really helped benefit a business? You don't even have to mention the name, but just where you've really sort of remedied a particular problem or challenge.
Yeah, I think most of the current projects are still more NDA level, but I think what I can share is that pretty much every enterprise has deployed some sort of a chatbot, right? Mm-hmm. And so this ability to then take this chatbot, which is a series of a single or multiple LLMs running behind it, and make it much more advanced is very attractive to people. And I think there's also this thinking right now that I'm not sure I want to connect all of my enterprise environment to something like a ChatGPT, because essentially I'd be exposing a lot of my enterprise information and my my employees and how they think and what they know. I'm exposing it without knowing exactly how OpenAI will interpret and use that information, right? Because a lot of what helps ChatGPT get better is the fact that we are open with it and we share with it a lot of the things we need it to do, and it kind of learns and gets better from that. But ultimately, that's still a third party, the way that most enterprises look at it. And so what they're doing is they're taking now what's available, quite good open source models. they're taking those off the shelf and they're standing up their own service, and they want it to be, as good and has some of the qualities that today we're so used to ChatGPT having. But it's not easy for them to do that right off the bat. You have to have the right teams. Sometimes you have to have multiple very experienced people who are setting up that infrastructure and inferencing stack. And so this piece of software that we're building called Intelligent Enterprise Memory, it's meant to be a very easy way to plug and play your any LLM. Talk about like a Llama or or DeepSeek or some of these other open source LLMs that are proving to be quite effective. It's a really great way to just enhance those off the shelf free open source LLMs with these more advanced ChatGPT like capabilities. And so that's what it's about with some of the LLM providers. And then on the infrastructure and GPU management level, quite interesting some of the things we're seeing there. Even with the vast, call it skills and breadth and engineering expertise that a company like NVIDIA has, what even they recognized last year was that as everyone is just buying up and deploying all this GPU infrastructure in all of these different places, whether it's in the hyperscale clouds, a neo cloud, or in their own data center, people are really struggling to manage and share this infrastructure with multiple projects and users and teams very effectively. So NVIDIA themselves acquired a company late last year called Run.ai.
Yep.
And it's a recognition that this layer is very nascent, right? So basically nobody has a great way to manage even NVIDIA GPUs, which are the dominant ones being installed everywhere. And so you can imagine that if that was a problem for NVIDIA, this is a problem for everybody else. So, Inferentia Trainium on AWS, AMD with their MI300s and MI325s. Nobody has a great software solution to manage GPU infrastructure, even at a basic level. And so that's the other big opportunity we see. We're working with some of the largest enterprises who are building out GPU clusters, and they need a better way to share and manage this infrastructure. And so that's the other kind of exciting thing I can just talk about at a non-NDA level, which is that we're working hard to build a platform agnostic version. You can think about it as a platform agnostic technology layer that essentially NVIDIA acquired by purchasing Run AI. But now that that's under NVIDIA, it's hard to see that it's going to be a super effective cross-hardware platform, right? I think they had the promise to be before they got acquired, but now that they're acquired under NVIDIA, it's going to be much more NVIDIA centric, and so we see a big gap in the industry today.
Well, that's literally what I was about to say. So you clearly identified that opportunity and plugging that gap. Look, one last question, slightly change of topic, but we were talking about it before, and I think I speak to a lot of people now that are in VP C-level roles, and it's all systems go all the time. It's demanding. It's getting up at 5 o'clock doing international calls. It's working late as well, and it's being on the go all the time. And then on top of that, you've got a team to manage. You've got events that you've got to go to, and I think it's managing all this sort of pressure. And we talked about it. You're a married man. You've got a wife. You've got 2 children. How do you create that sort of balance to ensure that you give your best to your job, but also obviously maintain best at home? I think people are battling with it a lot now, particularly as we go to more of a remote working, and it's sort of blurring the lines between working and home.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many layers of that. So I'll peel back a few different things, right? Yeah. I think at the same time, some people are getting used to working remotely, and then at other companies, you're being called back to the office. So in some ways, you actually have less working time in your workday if you're on the group that's being called back in the office, because now you have your commute time where you're not as productive as if you were a very diligent individual and you just zoom to your desk right after getting out of bed in the morning, right? So I think people are operating with less available work time because of that. And as we get older, we get married, we have children, we have families to manage. And I'll go back to 2 things. One is we didn't get a chance to talk about this, but just a week and a half ago, I ran I think it was my 6th or 7th marathon. and I was able to beat my 23-year-old self. So I hit a PR a week and a half ago, and that taught me a series of lessons as I reflect back on it in terms of managing a busy life. Mm-hmm. So how was that even possible? Because I'm thinking to myself, well, what are some of the things that I want to learn from this experience of having been able to run my fastest marathon time at my oldest version of myself, right? And one of the things is I go back to that first person that I talked about early on in our podcast, which is do less things, but do them extremely, extremely well. And I think that as you progress in your career, you have to be able to delegate and also say no and just not do certain things. And I think that that is kind of a key component of being able to scale. So if you can focus on hiring the right people, you're going to be able to trust them, and you're going to be able to do more through your team. And I think that that certainly helps. And I think that also you're going to have so many things that you think you have to do every day. So every day you just remind yourself, what are the 2 or 3 things I have to do that are the most important things? And every day you have a full awareness of what are those 2 or 3 important things that you get done, and you make sure you get those things done. That's the kind of what you do spend time on turns to gold versus everything you spend time on turns to SHIT. And I think that when I was doing the marathon training leading up to the race itself, right, it really kind of forced me to think in terms of what are the highest impact things I need to do each day outside of my training regimen and outside of making time for family that is going to have the highest impact. So sometimes in a weirdly unconventional way of thinking about it, you actually may be at your best when you have the most things that you need to balance and do, because then you're always doing kind of like the most important things when you are working, and you're not kind of just wasting your time sitting in front of a screen or sitting on your work chair. And maybe the final takeaway from the marathon training is that it also I was kind of working backwards from the goal, which is if the goal was to try to run better than my 23-year-old self, what would I have to do to increase my chance of actually achieving that goal? And one of those things was I had to lose some weight. I had to get into a much better shape in my life, closer to when I was back in college and coming out of college and being in great shape. You kind of work backwards from your end goals, and that helps kind of set you up for the success in the first place. And so
it's really important.
Yeah, and so I think I think maybe that's the advice that I have for new executives, which is don't be paralyzed by all the extra responsibility and all the extra meetings. Don't be paralyzed by any of that. Kind of own your own time. Build up your own team with good people, and then busy is not bad, because busy forces you to go back to a prioritization state every single morning. And I think that's maybe the best advice I'll have. And I think, again, everybody's learning. Everybody only has a bachelor's degree in AI. So if you get overwhelmed any particular day there, also remind yourself that everyone's just a bachelor's degree. You can probably catch up to them by just putting in the daily work.
No, absolutely. I mean, you're right. I mean, I think my biggest takeaway from this, there's many things, but if I was going to adopt some of these things, it's that laser sharp focus. 2 or 3 things, get them done. I've sometimes found when I've only got a half day, I've got a half day off, I'm the most productive. I get much more done in that morning than I get in the whole day before, because I've given myself that sort of time pressure just to be focused.
Exactly.
So, and it makes a huge, huge difference. But look, we've spoken a lot today. I've really enjoyed getting to know you and what you guys have been doing and what you're doing at Memverge, and understanding the business a lot more in your background. I'm going to have to call you back, I'm sure. I think it's an exciting market that we're in at the moment. There's a lot happening, and you've clearly put yourselves in a position where you're filling that gap. So I think people have learned a lot more from this call as well. So we'll have another conversation another time. But for now, thank you very much.
Sounds good. This was fun, Nick. Thanks a lot. Have a good one.
Cheers. Take care.